It's true. And honey, if we look at witches and witchcraft as a metaphor for the queer experience, we are people who have rejected and sanctioned systems of knowledge and gender and power, you know, to, you know, get what we need. But they left us with no choice, darling. Hey y'all, welcome back to Queer 101, the podcast where we talk about any and everything under the sun, including queer art, queer culture, queer literature, and whatever we want. I am Peppermint.
And I'm Hugh Ryan, aka Hugh the Historian.
Listen, Hugh, I just want to dive right into our discussion for today because I've been thinking a lot about the book Bargain Witch our book of the month over at All Store, and all the things that Brooke discusses in the book, and it really made me think about like a lot of things, honestly. But one of the points that I think for me really stood out was the idea of people who were, you know, no question special in some way, forced to live outside of the societal structure, sort of finding their own way to navigate these systems. And, you know, as queer and certainly trans people, we are often pushed to the fringes of society, as we're seeing happen in this moment.
Right now.
And so the question that I'm putting out on the table today is, how do queer people and marginalized voices of any kind, frankly, find power and belonging in those spaces that exist outside mainstream society? That's what I want to know from you.
That's a good one. It's a great starter for today. I mean, I don't know. I think we can look at this from both a historical and contemporary perspective, you know, and I think for me, at least, it comes down largely to choice. You know, these spaces that you're talking about, these spaces that exist outside mainstream society, there's all kinds of spaces outside of mainstream. Some of them are ones that we choose and we create together as witches or as queer people or people of color or religious minorities or what, you know, any kind of marginalized groups. But there are other ones that we are forced into, right? It's like the question is, are you living in that like little shack in the woods because it is your dream life, a way that you have created for yourself? Or are you living there because no one will rent you a house anywhere else in town? You know, it's oppression or forced ostracization. I can barely say that word. Ostracization.
Yeah, ostracization. I say,
if you're made into an ostrich.
Yeah.
Say size. Oh, that's good. It's size. Ostracization. Anyway,
yeah.
It comes down to, are you forced into that shack in the woods or are you choosing there intentionally? That's where the power, I think, comes from.
You know, and I think it's even less about that. I think it's more about, you're 100%. That's the truth in terms of like us being able to have a message that we resonate with and looking for a little bit of explanation about it. But I do think now that you say that, it is also about the narrative about that, because what we've seen happen and what we're seeing happen all over the world, in Gaza, what we're seeing happen in the United States, what we're seeing happen in Venezuela is, you know, for instance, with people who are unhoused. What they'll do is they'll jack up the rent. They'll create a system that people cannot hang on, and then they have no choice but to get you evict them if they can't pay. You evict them if they can't pay, then they're out on the street, and maybe they have a substance abuse issue, maybe they don't, maybe they just don't have any money, and they're out on the street, and obviously they don't have access to like running water regularly or things like that, the resources that you would have inside of a house or a living situation. And so then, you know, like maybe they haven't showered, maybe they're whatever, you start to lose access to those things. And then you're suddenly like, oh, look at that dirty person. They can't even get an apartment. No, you just evicted them. And so like I think it's both. The society pushes people out. Just like, you know, with Black folks, formerly enslaved and then formerly enslaved African people here in America, who were like denied the ability to read for hundreds of years, and then made fun, and then said, "Oh, you're just not intelligent." Anyway, back to the book, because I wanted to rant. These
no, I love it. Oh, I love a good rant.
Yeah, it's true. Most of these folk, primarily women, the witches, were definitely forced to live on the literal and proverbial edges of society. Simply because people, you know, couldn't label them or fully understand who they were. And I mean, I guess, you know, that was like I think that's the sort of the bystanders, observation, like someone who
Hmm.
maybe back then would have said, "Oh, those ladies, they just can't get it together," not being involved in the system of oppression that could have oppressed these people. And I don't want to take away their agency because some of them may have chosen, like you said, to live in the area that they lived in, or in the shack, or in the whatever they were living. But I do think that there was could have even been something, if not systemic, at least cultural, that could have
Hmm.
forced those people, in order for the society that they were the society that they were living in order for it to function the way that they wanted it to function, the people in power, they needed.
Right.
You always have to have somebody on
Got
the
to have a
bottom rung.
scapegoat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
always have to have a scapegoat. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And how often I
Yeah,
think
go
we
ahead.
pile that onto a single scapegoat. Like I was thinking about what you were saying a second ago about, you don't have access to a shower. Now you appear dirty, and dirty is a sign of being frightening somehow. When dirty
Mm-hmm.
often means like you don't, like you said, have the ability to clean something, right? It often means you are lacking in what we privileged people have all the time. It's not a sign that
Mm-hmm.
you're scary. But I think, living in New York City, you hear all these endless debates by people who are never here, never ride the subway, who are like terrified at the idea that they might have to see someone who is unhoused because just
And
seeing them is somehow violent against them. When the
and I,
truth is, those folks are at more danger from the people around them than we are at from them. It's like that instant of like, as soon as someone looks a little bit different, a little bit off, wrong, poor, especially as soon as someone looks poor or in poor mental health, we interpret them as a danger. And then ostracizing them becomes not just something we're doing that's terrible, but in fact a way of protecting. We have to ostracise them. They're scary.
Right.
They're
Yeah, that goes.
frightening,
That's part of the narrative. Look at them. They're bad for us, and they're the enemy. We have to get them because they're going to harm you. And I think
Hmm.
that your perspectives just probably. I would imagine that my perspectives and the things that are important to me might shift if I suddenly lost my house, like might lose something or whatever I would lose access to. Then my perspectives would shift, and then suddenly taking a shower is less important to me than staying warm. And I would
Hmm.
rather, if I'm dirty, I would rather be dirty and warm inside of a subway than dirty and stinky and outside on the street. I don't care about whether I am dirty or stinky or have showered or not. I want to be in warmth because warmth equals safety. And that's the only free place that people can go to get warm. Not
Hmm.
the only, but I mean, like that's the most, probably the easiest accessible and the widest spread. The subway system is like, you can find one on every corner.
Yeah.
And so, you know, of course, people are going to go into the subway in the winter. For the New Yorkers listening to this, and I just, yeah, not. I know this isn't about homelessness, but I think that the one thing that, um, I try my best always to do whenever I encounter somebody who's like, maybe they come up to me and ask for, some help or something like that. If I'm not able to, which many times I'm not, I am working
Hmm.
class as well, especially during the holidays when it becomes you're on the train and it's literally like a processional of 40 people asking for money.
Hmm.
You might not be able to the average individual might not be able to do it, but maybe if we all chipped in, that's a different story. But I think it's when you see somebody coming through, I think the one thing that I would want in that situation, if I weren't, not the one thing, but one of the things that I would want if I were not able to get um, money, is just connection and
Hmm.
not being. I can't imagine that anybody wants to be treated like an outcast, like they're not human, like they don't belong, like they're not worthy of just like looking in the face, looking in the
Yeah.
eye, which is free to do. And so I've always tried to be empathetic in that way and think of how I would feel. Like I can't imagine walking through, having to be in public for days or weeks or months or years, and no one wanting to ever look me in the eye when
Hmm.
I walk through. That's terrible.
Yeah. And I think that says so much because I think so many of us are like, it's that shame, right? The reason we don't look those people in the eye is that we understand on some level that the way we are behaving is shameful, whether that's us
Mm-hmm.
individually in
Mm-hmm.
ignoring them or us as a society in not giving them resources. It's not taking care of them, not meeting them as people. And then that shame gets flipped around and it corrodes us inside sometimes and becomes this like anger at those people. How dare you make me feel ashamed when all they're actually trying to do is live. And the shame is coming from us for ignoring them, for not helping them,
Yes, from
for
us. It
voting
has
in
nothing to do with them.
politicians. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't. No, we
They're not
create
making
that
us
in
feel this way.
ourselves. No. And they're not. I
Mm-mm-mm.
mean, sometimes they are making us feel ashamed, and they should be. I mean, there are times we should be ashamed for our behaviors, but we so often violently react to shame. And like you said, ostracize those people even further, turn on them even worse. And, we're talking a lot about homeless people in the subway, but I think this is a story that, Brooke talks a lot about in Bargain Witch. The idea that you are a witch, you are outside society, you are weird, you are strange, you are educated, you are ugly, you are no longer fertile. And as a woman, that is your only role in our society. All of these people we push to the edges and then get this sense of shame over the way that they're treated, because they're treated as less than human, or as less than desirable, or less deserving. I mean, so often, and I'm going to go back to the homeless example because I think it is so telling in this moment, but so often we hear that these people don't deserve our protection, right? It's always, the city's always talked about as like, what are we going to do about the homeless problem, right? How do we get the homeless out of the subway? Not homeless people are people who are in the subway because they, like everyone else, use the services of the city, right? They're a problem inflicted upon us. And I think that same view is how we other witches. It's how we have historically, like we were talking about last time, othered queer people. You get societies that really push queer people to the margins. And I think that all of that is sad, honestly, or maybe I should say pathetic, because it is happening again in this country right now. I mean, we are essentially dealing with witch hunts on queer and particularly trans people because we are ashamed, I think, of the way that we have treated queer and trans people. We are terrified of queer and trans folks, particularly young people, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's wild how we always have to have an enemy.
Yeah. It's always
That's
about
so
having an
true.
enemy.
Yeah, go in, honey, go in.
I mean, it's maybe, not the thing I want to be thinking about in this holiday time, but it is true that we are constantly looking for enemies, and we look at people who have rejected those structures, right? And look to them and say, like, maybe they have things to teach us, rather than they are a threat who are to be destroyed because they are outside of our structures.
It's true. And honey, if we look at witches and witchcraft as a metaphor for the queer experience, we are people who have rejected and sanctioned systems of knowledge and gender and power, to, get what we need. But they left us with no choice, darling.
Yeah.
We have to become a
Yeah.
witch.
We have to self-initiate, as Brooke would say, into our power,
Yeah.
into our witchcraft, into our queerness, because we have been pushed to a margin where we have no other way to find that community and find that identity and find that resistance.
Yeah. So how can we as queer people, how can we recognize that power, and recognizing and acknowledging that we are builders of counter communities all the time, And I I I actually mentioned this yesterday, that in a different conversation, that since we make do, and everybody has to figure out a way to get access to X, Y, and Z. The things we
Mm-hmm.
need and want. And some people, that's just part of their everyday existence in society. And for some people, they're denied those things if you are ostracized, if you are put away, if you're shunned, if you're cast aside, if you're, excommunicated, whatever. But you still need those things that you want and need. And so
Mm-hmm.
then you end up getting them in a different way. You make them, you create them, you fabricate them, you imagine them, whatever it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, queer people and anybody who's marginalized, obviously, and sort of disenfranchised from the greater system, they end up figuring out a way to get what they need and want.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly we're all there at the finish line. Like, you thought you left me back at the start, but honey, I was running my own situation. I had to figure out another path, and I might have beat you here. I might have found a shortcut.
And you might never even get there. It's funny. What you're thinking really reminds me of when we talked to Tourmaline a few weeks back, and what she was saying about Marsha P. Johnson and the other girls in hotel rooms freedom dreaming, right? Having these ideas about what
Mm.
their lives could be if they were outside of these awful structures that were oppressing them. And how those dreams, which at the time were like impossibilities, right? They were fantasies that they were cooking up, have now become in so many ways realities because of exactly what you said. They found each other, found a way to get what they needed for each other, share it communally. You know, whether it's a coven or a chosen
Mm.
family, they found those people, they spoke those dreams into existence, and then they fought for them. They resisted the main power structure because they had another vision. It's almost like they had a spell they could cast, a dream that they could bring into this world. You know, whether we talk about it as witchcraft or political resistance or freedom dreaming, I think what you're saying just connects so many layers of queer history and so many other marginalized histories, of course, and our present moment. It's all about finding those spaces where we can come together, find our own way forward and through, and find our own way to power.
You know, I mean, it is. I do think about that. Sometimes I have resentment for that. Not resentment that it happens, resentment that like, look, we have to, you know, it's it seems like it all that it sometimes feels, I guess, in this one particular system so linear that like you only get help from the one person above you. We won't get help from the people all the way at the top who you have to. So you have to. If I don't have sugar and I need to bake a cake, which has never happened, but
You always
I
have
have to
sugar.
go and knock on my neighbor's door, right? I don't have to go, but like that's where I'm gonna go. So then it's
Hmm.
suddenly my neighbor, and that's a neighborly thing, and that's community, and I'm grateful. I think that's human nature, but it does make me roll my eyes at like, why can't we all fucking go over to the grocery store and be like, we don't have the money, give us the sugar, you know?
Hmm.
Not that we want to rob the grocery store for sugar, but I'm saying, you know, like the it's more of it is more of a stressor or a burden on my neighbor to ask them for that than us all going to the grocery
Hmm.
store saying your prices are too high, but you need to do something about that. Give us sugar. You know, I don't know. That might sound kind of strange, but I'm just saying like, thank goodness for the kindness of people being kind-hearted. You know, thank goodness for that, because if it weren't, then a lot of people would be out of luck. But it just sucks that we all can't realize that like in order for that person who's unhoused or that person who needs this or that, who needs some food, to get some food tonight, they're going to have to get it from somebody else, which is great that there's somebody to do that. But we don't know if that person's only one paycheck away from, and
Hmm.
oftentimes it seems it is the person who does have empathy for that, who has been in that situation before, who's been like, you know, I was starving last week, but I have an extra sandwich, so here you can have half of mine.
Right.
But that is not the mindset of these ultra wealthy, ultra rich corporate
No.
types. They're not
No.
like, I've got enough,
Hmm.
you know.
Remember when Elon Musk said he was going to solve world poverty if they gave him a way to do it for $1 billion, and they did, and then he was like, "Yeah, no, I was kidding." Right? Like they don't care about that. But I think you're pointing to like the limits of mutual aid, right? Like we need a government that actually thinks we deserve a universal basic livability, you know, housing and food and health care, not health insurance, but actual health care. And that
Healthcare
without
that
those
we have.
things,
Yeah, I think people think of health insurance as health care because they those two things are off. The two words are
yeah,
often.
we've never had anything else in this country. Like how would we even know to think
Yeah,
differently, right? Most of us.
yeah, yeah, and you're 100% right about the limits of mutual aid, and I really do think that we should start. You know, I'm going to start making a paradigm shift and thinking of like, you know, no, when people, I'm not usually in a situation where I'm arguing with people, but like if they are like, oh, socialism, then it's like, okay, no, you don't like socialism, then let's get rid of socialism for the ultra wealthy. Let's get rid of
Hmm.
these tax cuts. Let's get rid of all this stuff that we're handing out, these programs that they're getting all these grants and all this stuff. Like that's socialism for the ultra wealthy. If you want to have zero socialism, then let's have zero socialism. But it
Yeah.
can't just be socialism for the rich and nothing for people who are, you know, they're taking
Yeah.
money out of our pockets, quite
You
literally.
know, I'm part of this lawsuit against Anthropic for stealing all of everyone's books and using them to feed their AI
Mm.
plagiarism machine. And you know, the argument
Oh,
being made by them is, "Oh, AI can't work if we pay everyone what they deserve. But also, you have to pay us to then use the product we make by stealing all of your
all of
content
your
that you
work.
have made." Yeah. And it's like, why is it that we're the ones, your machine can't work unless you steal everything. But if we turn that around and illegally download a song via Napster, as we used to in the late 90s and early 2000s, then we're going to be sued for copyright infringement. It's right. It's like the
Exactly.
corporation is always protected, but the individual, who the fuck knows?
Is not. And at best, corporations were supposed to be people, which they are not.
No,
But legally, they are protected like people. But now they're protected like the most precious person in the world, and we're not treated like people. What the
no.
fuck?
Yeah,
Anyway,
corporations are people. Money is speech. That's what you need to know in our
and
new
humans are not
dystopia.
people. That's
Yeah,
basically it. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Oh, happy holidays, everyone. Happy holidays.
damn holidays. We can look into community for sure, because modern queer culture and even historic queer culture for sure has always been protective, and we can look at these chosen families and how
Hmm.
this connection and nurturing in itself can be radical. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is so much, queer history, at least, like in a let's say modern American context, and by modern I just mean like since the founding of the revolution. But like you can find all of these examples of people who have lived outside of society's rules and strictures, and they were punished for it, they were hounded for it. Yeah, they were called witches and they were told they were ugly, but they also found each other, right? And on the margins, they began to dream and to see what the mainstream got wrong. I think it's like everything. It's like your super strength is your super weakness, your weakness is your strength. When you're pushed out to the margin, you suddenly have a vantage point that the center just does not have, right? Like the mainstream cannot see a way out of these problems. I I know it's silly, but I often think the future is a margin just like anything else, right? It's like this thin strip of possibility that people are pushed to. We're always talking about how, oh, the future, everyone's going to not have gender, or like queerness is always part of the way we imagine these futures. It's a margin just like everything else. And those of us who are pushed to the margins really have a view that the center doesn't. And so that's one thing I am very thankful for, and that I think about a lot when you were talking earlier about Bargain Witch and how it talks about witches being pushed to the margins and power and resistance. It's like, yeah, it sucks that we are marginalized. Straight up, hands down, should not be so. At the same time, it allows us to see what the mainstream cannot see. And I think it's part of what, as we were talking about the other day, is the reasons why queer people are often positioned, especially trans people, as truth tellers, as religious figures. Once you have gone through that transformation, once you've seen society from the outside, you literally have a gift that the mainstream does not have.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the margins, we're going to take a quick break with a very special message. Hey y'all, it's Peppermint, and honey, I have something fabulous to share with you. I have teamed up with Moody Teas to create something truly special. It's called Transcendence. It isn't just a tea blend. It is a whole movement. A gorgeous, color-shifting holiday tea that supports advocates for trans equality, the organization, with every single purchase. So here's what I'm asking. When you're thinking about what to get mom, dad, grandma, auntie, whoever is on your holiday list, think Transcendence Tea. It's crafted with butterfly pea flower, rooibos, spearmint, and just a kiss of vanilla. So it's a blue vanilla mint tea. And this blend was made to uplift, empower, and remind us all that transformation is beautiful. And the best part is, it is just as stunning as it is delicious. The vibrant blue turns color with just a squeeze of lemon to a deep purple hue. Honey, it's holiday magic in a cup. So head to moodyteas.co/peppermint to order, and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. So this year, I urge you to sip and support. Your friends, your family, they're all going to love it, baby. And you can tell them that if they don't do it, then the tea that they're drinking is transphobic, okay? You can go ahead and say that I said that. But the best news is that you'll be giving back to the community at the same time. And it's a wonderful organization that helps people who are in such need. So once again, that's moodyteas.co/peppermint. Wishing you a joyful holiday season and the happiest of New Year's. So we're jumping back in before we only have a little bit left, but before we wrap it up, what do we think that this means for the future, Hugh, in terms of again making a paradigm shift or like sort of reframing, because it seems as though whether we're talking about people who we're talking about witches, or we're talking about other marginalized groups, or all the above. It seems like it's on repeat. Like
Mm-hmm.
the tactics and the method for ostracization and marginalization and oppression seem to, they just keep coming back around. And the
Mm-hmm.
format really doesn't, if you've done it in the past, anybody who's observed the format in the past, you would think or hope would recognize that what's happening now. But it,
And
so what
yet,
does that say for the future? Like, are we finally awake?
you know, I think that we go through cycles on every issue of being awake and asleep, awake and asleep. And some of the issues come back and some of them change generation to generation. I think being awake is like something we constantly have to ask ourselves, are we awake? Are my eyes open? There's that Mr. Rogers quote, look for the helpers, like what to do in the moment of emergency. You
Oh
look for the
yeah.
people who are helping. I often think in non-emergency moments, I ask myself, look for the outsiders. Like, who is obviously being kept out of the conversation? Who does not have power in our society? Because it's unlikely that they are powerless by choice. It's unlikely that they are ostracized because that's how they want to be. It's unlikely that the rumors I hear about them are all true. So that question, like, what do we do about this? It's like, you're right, the repetition, the oppression comes back cyclically. It's like the worst Christmas music you can imagine.
It
It's
really is. You're
always
like,
going to
oh,
come
not
back.
this again.
Hmm. And you just got to keep your ear open for like what is outside of it, what is other. That's, I mean, I don't know. That is my answer. What do you think? How do we do this?
uh, well, you know, I think that I am slightly encouraged because I know that had I've followed a journey and been able to evolve my thinking on some of these things, and like evolve my thinking on a lot of these topics that honestly I wasn't even thinking about 10,
Mm.
15 years ago, and not in the same way. And so I hope that other people are making that sort of a similar path or similar journey in their own timing. But it kind of feels like, come on, y'all, like TikTok,
Come
you
on.
know?
Yeah. There's a I saw this play a few years ago called Heroes of the Fourth Turning. Really amazing, incredible play about religious conservatives. But it works on this idea of the fourth turning, which I'm not going to get it totally right because it's a conservative religious concept. But basically, there are eras in which we live, and certain eras call for certain kinds of responses. And the fourth turning is this moment of sort of like heroes and monsters, right? Because things are breaking
Mm-hmm.
down. It's the moment where the era is changing. And I do think, when you're saying, come on now, everybody catch up. I think we are in a moment like that. Like now is a time where things are being restructured, things are falling apart, and that makes new things possible, right? Or necessary or urgent. And I think that this
Mm-hmm.
is a moment where people need to like make decisions. I'm going to quote Game of Thrones: chaos is a ladder. Where do we want to take this back to? I don't know. As always, I think we could
I
carry
like
this
it.
discussion on and on. Maybe that's a good place to stop for today, but we need to figure this out, right? And so maybe listeners, if you are thinking about your answers for this, your ways that we move forward, or what this moment is calling us for, let us know. Please drop us a comment, a review, or even write to us at questions@queer101podcast.com, and we'll tackle your thoughts next week.
That's right. And remember, we will be back every single Tuesday, where you can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts
Mm-hmm.
from. Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Google, and of course on my YouTube channel.
Etc. Oh,
Uh,
yes, the best.
yes. So please like, subscribe, follow, and you know what? Comment an evergreen tree or a Christmas tree if you have made it this far into the video, and then comment and leave a 5-star review if you're just listening to us. And either way, if you do one of those things, it'll be a huge help. It helps us in the algorithm. It helps other people find
Mm-hmm.
our podcast, and it costs you absolutely nothing. So please do all those things.
Yeah, and thanks for listening. Thanks for watching if you're watching, and thanks for reading along with us. See you soon.
That's right. We will see you next week right here. Same bat time, same bat channel. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
This podcast is part of Pride House Media, hosted by us, Peppermint and Hugh, produced and edited by Josh Rosenzweig, with original music composed by Nell Balaban.
If you enjoyed this episode, then don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and a review. It really helps others discover the show.
You can stay connected and join the conversation by following us at Peppermint 24/7 or write to us at questions@queer101podcast.com.
Thank you for listening. And remember, our history is your history. Stay proud, stay curious, and we'll see you next time on Queer 101.